as we battle through the COVID era together. And today we are finishing with a bang by having wonderful admissions officers from Barnard College, Bryn College, Mount Holyoke College, and Smith College with us here today to talk about women's colleges. And they will certainly answer a lot of your questions that you may have had, and we will have time at the end to also address some of your specific questions. So as always, I know that you know the drill already, for those of you who have been tuning in Tuesday after Tuesday. But if you are with us on Zoom, you can make use of the Q&A chat box. If you are with us on YouTube, go ahead and use that chat box too, and your questions will be forwarded to our admissions officers. So I think that's all from me, and I am going to hand it over to Meredith to take it away.
Okay, hello, and thank you so much for being with us tonight. First and foremost, of course, we want to say that we hope you and your family and friends are all staying healthy and doing well in these challenging and unprecedented times. And I want to thank very much our hosts at InitialView for organizing this event. To begin, I'd like to ask my colleagues to introduce themselves. I'm not sure that I did. I'm Meredith McDill. I'm an assistant director at Smith College.
And I'll go. I'm Jennifer Fondiller. I'm the vice president for enrollment at Barnard College and also a Barnard alumna.
And I'm the other Jennifer. I'm Jennifer Russell. I'm representing Bryn College, and I'm an associate director at Bryn Mawr.
Hi everyone, my name is Annie Sullivan. I'm an Associate Director of International Admission at Mount Holyoke College.
Thank you. So our institutions travel and present together both physically in non-COVID times and now virtually to speak not only about our individual institutions, but to give an overview of women's colleges in general. So this evening, we're going to do a little of both while leaving plenty of time for your questions at the end of the program. So we all do a lot of speaking about both liberal arts colleges and women's colleges all around the world, often in cultures where there's not a lot of familiarity with either. So I always start with a little bit of history. Women's colleges were founded during the mid and late 19th century in response to a need for advanced education for women at a time when they were not admitted to most institutions of higher education. From a high of 300 or so women's colleges before the widespread coeducational movement, there are now just under 40 women's colleges remaining in the US. So these independent nonprofit women's colleges, which included the Seven Sisters, the original name given to Barnard, Smith, Mount Holyoke, Bryn Mawr, Wellesley, Vassar, and Radcliffe because of our parallel to the Ivy League men's colleges, and other similar institutions largely located in the northeastern United States, were founded to provide education opportunities to women equal to those available to men and were geared toward women who wanted to study the liberal arts. So one of the first most important factors to note about women's colleges in the US is that we are all pretty much universally small liberal arts colleges. Then during the 1960s and 70s, due to social and legislative changes, several institutions of higher ed that had been previously all male opened their doors to women. Many women's colleges either became coeducational themselves, merged with all male or coeducational institutions, or closed due to declining enrollment and financial problems related to the increased competition in higher education. As a result, the number of women's colleges shrank. Of the Seven Sisters colleges I spoke of earlier, Vassar became co-ed, while Radcliffe was absorbed by Harvard. However, our group is still commonly referred to as the Seven Sisters, even though we're now 5, or the Sisters for short. And some of the women's colleges during the coeducational movement, like the Sisters, reaffirmed our missions, believing that it was important to continue to offer an all-female educational environment for women. So women's colleges have had a formative role in shaping the history of women's education and in the advancement of women in the United States and the larger world. Next slide, please. So we hear from students across the world, especially in cultures where there are many girls' high schools, that there's often a reluctance to consider a women's college because students who have attended girls' high schools think that their experience at a women's college will be the same or similar. And we're here to help debunk a lot of myths this evening, but this is one we wanted to address right from the start. One thing you have to realize is that a women's college in the US will be very different from a girls' high school anywhere, and partly because of the partnerships we all have with co-ed institutions. As you see, we all have partnerships and are part of college consortia whereby students from other institutions, both male and female, take classes and participate in other activities on our campuses. And our students are able to do the same at co-ed schools. So you absolutely mustn't think of a women's college as a place where you're going to be cloistered away with all women all the time. When I host students, for example, visiting students' families and counselors visiting Smith for the first time, knowing we're the largest women's college, they're always surprised by all the gender diversity they see there, and partly because of our membership in the 5 College Consortium. Okay, so having gotten that out of the way, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Jennifer to present our next slides.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm delighted to be with you today. And so let's talk a little bit about the liberal arts. You know, there are in the United States over something like 4,000 colleges and universities, but only about maybe around 200, a little more than that, are designated as what are called liberal arts colleges. And liberal arts colleges, as Meredith mentioned, are generally small, and small means they might have anywhere from about 800 total students, maybe upwards of, say, 4,000 total students. Most of them generally are in the like 1,200 to 3,000 student range. And they're all located on residential campuses, which is a huge part of the environment within a liberal arts college, so that everybody is living and learning together on campus. It really creates this sort of very strong campus community where you know so many people that you're walking around with, that professors will be familiar when you're on campus. And it just really creates this sort of sense for 4 years that you're in this very sort of special environment. We focus on undergraduate students at liberal arts colleges generally, and that means that it's leading towards a Bachelor of Arts degree or a Bachelor of Science degree at our institutions. And then many of our students will ultimately then go on to some sort of graduate program. So whether they want to go to medical school or they want to get a PhD or a doctorate in a particular subject area. And I think these colleges were really founded with the idea that we wanted students to be able and really push them to study disciplines throughout. So across the humanities, across the social sciences, across the sciences, as well as the arts. So the idea of liberal arts does not mean there's no science and it's only focused on arts. It really encompasses science, arts, social sciences, and humanities. And it's quite different from other places where at another, say, a university, and certainly in many countries outside of the US, when you start university, you pick the area that you want to study, and that's all that you study, and really exclusively. At a liberal arts college, you start pretty broad usually. So you're studying lots of different subject areas, and ultimately you do choose a major, but you're also going to take biology and history and psychology and languages and economics and political science, and the list goes on and on. Our students are prepared, and I'll explain this, to go on to many different kinds of careers. They become doctors and lawyers and research scientists and teachers, and they go into business and finance, but that's not what they initially study. They're going to really be broad when they begin. And we can change the slide now. And so just, to emphasize that the idea behind a liberal arts is that for you who are watching, maybe you have lots of ideas of what you want to ultimately do. You're not sure. Liberal arts will allow you to study lots of things before you also have to maybe decide what you're really into. Classes are run as what are called seminars often, and so they're very small. Some classes will be 10 students in a class, some classes will be 40, but generally at liberal arts colleges, you are not going to find 200, 300, 400 person lecture classes. The idea is that it's a much smaller, much more intimate kind of environment. And the goal is also to go way beyond just learning facts. At a liberal arts college, you're going to learn, how to interact with others, and not just be in the same room and taking notes. We want our students to learn how to be leaders, to solve problems and make decisions, to learn to work as part of a team, right? To collaborate and work on projects together, and learn to write effectively and also speak effectively. When you think about what jobs and what careers want, that's what employers are looking for, students that can do those kinds of things. So we think it's pretty powerful in the end, and we're excited to tell you a little bit more about our schools. Thank you. So now we move into the little part about our schools. And so since I'm Barnard, I'm going to start. So let's see. I mentioned at the very beginning that I graduated from Barnard. So it really has a very strong place in my heart. We have about 2,700 students at Barnard. So we're on the little larger side of a liberal arts college. You can see a slide here in the background, which is our campus. So we're in New York City. And when I think of New York City, I certainly think like a place like Seoul, like big skyscrapers, very, very busy. And indeed, New York is crazy busy. But we're located in a part of New York City that's probably about 20 minutes north of the center, the heart of New York City. So it's a subway ride north, and you exit the subway to this beautiful campus. The green part of our campus, our lawns and our buildings on the left, that's all Barnard. And then you can see a street on the right-hand side of the slide, and across the street is Columbia University. We have always had a partnership with Columbia University ever since we were founded in 1889. So very, very long time. And Columbia actually went co-ed in 1983, which was quite late in the United States. They were all men before that. So we were the women's college, they were the men's college. When they went co-ed, we decided to stay all women's. And so we continue to have a partnership with Columbia. Our students definitely take advantage of New York City. How could you not? You're in this amazing city. And so you have this sort of split between a really robust campus life, and you could spend all of your time on campus, lots of clubs and organizations, but why would you? Because you also have the city. So it's this real combination of going to museums and doing internships in New York City, and then also being on the Columbia campus, using our libraries, their libraries. Social life will be very split between the two places. But at the end of the day, what I always like to say is you come home to Barnard, and you can see that it feels, to me, at least to me, like a very, very warm and sort of welcoming place, a little bit of an oasis in New York City. About 90% of our students live in campus housing. So when we talked about liberal arts colleges being residential, very much so. And then there's some, I will just end by saying there's some very special kind of programs on our campus. So in addition to the many, many liberal arts and sciences departments and majors students will choose from, we also have a Center for Leadership Studies on our campus. And I'm sure some of my colleagues will talk about similar kinds of centers on their campuses. We have a digital design center because that's really exploding in terms of careers that students are interested in. A computational science center, also computer science has really grown for us. And then also really strong programs in writing and in dance. So I will stop there and let my colleagues introduce their schools, but I'm happy to take questions later. Thank you.
Right, thank you. So we're going in alphabetical order. So I'm up next. Again, I'm Jennifer Russell, and I'm representing Bryn Mawr College. We're not in New York, but we do have a little New York connection because our campus was laid out by Olmsted, who designed Central Park. So there's a little factoid for today. We are just outside of Philadelphia. And Philadelphia, if you know your geography, is right in between Washington, D.C. and New York. So we're the 3 dots, we're the middle one. We are the smallest of the 7 sisters with about 1,300 students. We're the furthest south, so our weather is just a tiny bit milder than our northern sisters, but we get 4 seasons, no worries about that. And we tout a really large international population as well. Students, about 22% of our students come from overseas. A couple unique things about Bryn Mawr is our connection with other colleges in the immediate area. And I know there's a teeny tiny map on that slide, but those little red dots are the other colleges that we're connected with. And that includes Haverford College, Swarthmore College, and the University of Pennsylvania. And students take classes at all of those other institutions. Haverford is the closest, both in proximity and relationship. There are literally thousands of cross registrations every year among all of these colleges. And we're just 1,300 students, so you don't have to be a math major to figure out what's going on here. Lots of students are cross-registering. At the same time, we're separate colleges, we have separate identities, very strong sense of Bryn Mawr identity, very proud to be a women's college, very diverse in terms of academics and what students are interested in and their backgrounds. Students are, about a third of our students major in math or science, which is 2.5 times the national average. So we're very proud of that. The campus is beautiful itself. We are known for having the oldest self-government student association in the country. So in terms of what the campus community is like, it's very, very self-governed. Students are very, very involved. We have some interesting traditions that maybe we can talk about later. We have an honor code where our students take their exams self-scheduled and unproctored. So all of these kind of create I think a pretty unique community that our students are very, very proud of, and so are our alums. I heard a quote once that a student said, and I think this is really nice, is that Bryn Mawr is the kind of place that you come as you are and you become what you want to be. So I'll leave it with that.
All right. Well, hi again, everyone. This is Annie. I am an Associate Director of International Mission at Mount Holyoke College. You will actually hear from me a little bit about our location. I'll do some of the lifting for Meredith because Mount Holyoke and Smith actually share a very similar location. We're in the northeast part of the United States in Massachusetts, and we're on the western part of Massachusetts. So it's a really beautiful, safe part of the state. We're about an 1.5-hour bus ride from Boston and about 3 hours from New York. At Mount Holyoke, we have over 50 different majors, and some of our most popular ones include computer science, psychology, economics, neuroscience, English, and international relations. Over 3/4 of our courses have fewer than 20 students in them, so definitely getting that small class size environment. We too are a very global campus. 27% of our student body comes from outside of the US. But in addition to that, in addition to students coming from a broad variety of backgrounds, so do our faculty. Over 2/3 of our faculty speak a language other than English, and over 3/4 of our faculty have lived outside of the United States as well. I'm going to focus on just a couple of things about Mount Holyoke. Of course, there's many, but I'll talk a little bit about our Thimble Makerspace and Innovation Lab, as well as our commitment to wellness and well-being. So I mentioned our Thimble Makerspace and Innovation Lab. That's a really cool part of our community where students can come together to relax and create, or to push their boundaries and learn something new. So you have the option of coming and using sewing machines to make pillows for your residential room, or birthday cards with a laser cutter, or 3D print chocolates for your friends and family. So it's a really cool place to get creative and play, or also, of course, learn and grow and using different forms of technology academically in that space as well. We also have a great commitment to helping students balance their rigorous academic lives and their heavy involvement around campus with their well-being. We offer meditation classes in our Japanese tea garden. We have Tai Chi, yoga, and every evening we have one favorite tradition of mine called Milk and Cookies, where students come and take a break, gather and get to see each other, and of course have some sugary, delicious cookies as well. Each year we have an event around finals called No Study Zone, and it relieves stress leading up to those final exams. You can come and faculty and staff have booths where you can come and learn how to make earrings or pet dogs, which would be my favorite thing to do, and create just different forms of decoration for your room, art projects. Again, play, relax, do puzzles, play games, get together with your community, and just, taking that pressure off of those heavy academics, those heavy exams, and taking a break and putting things into perspective so that you can go back to your studying, to your laptop, to your books afterwards and feel a little bit more rejuvenated. So I wish I had a little bit more time to share, but I'll finish by just mentioning that SATs and ACTs have been optional at Mount Holyoke for the last 20 years. So if you're nervous about all these new test optional policies, what do they really mean? We have been test optional for about 20 years and continue in that commitment right now. So that's a brief introduction, and I look forward to sharing more later.
All right, hello again. I'm Meredith with Smith College. Happy to give you an overview of Smith, which, as I mentioned, is the largest of the women's colleges with 2,750 students, 14% of whom are citizens of countries outside the US. And of our US students, about a third identify as US students of color. As Annie mentioned, we're in Western Massachusetts, just under 2 hours from Boston and about 3 hours from New York City, and part of the largest and most widely utilized college consortium in the country, with Mount Holyoke, Amherst, and Hampshire colleges, and the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. This gives you access to 7,000 different classes. There are 30,000 students altogether in that consortium, participating in activities on one another's campuses. And our town, the town of Northampton, is really the lively hub within the 5-college consortium. So those 30,000 students aren't just coming to our campus, but also congregating in our town, which is a very short, safe walking distance from campus. Smith is the only women's college and one of only a handful of colleges here in the US that offers what's called the open curriculum, which is essentially the most flexible course of study you could have available to you, because rather than a core curriculum or general education or what are sometimes called area or distribution requirements, outside of the 10 to 14 classes that you must take to fulfill the requirements of your major, you're free to take classes in absolutely any area of interest to you. So it makes it very possible for students to double major, and it makes for a great dynamic in all of our classes because all of the students there with you are there because they're truly interested in that subject matter and not because they're going through and ticking off these various area or distribution requirements. We're also the women's college that has our own fully accredited engineering program. And currently at Smith, about 40% of our students are majoring in science, technology, engineering, or math. We're a great liberal arts institution. Art is our largest department. Economics remains the most popular major for our international students. But all of us like to talk about our strength in STEM because it speaks so well to what our missions have always been, to really propel women into leadership roles, especially in fields like STEM that have traditionally been male dominated. We have a really unique living and dining situation at Smith. Rather than traditional dormitories, our students live in these 37 different houses spread around campus. They vary from one another both architecturally and in terms of size. The smallest only has 10 students, the largest has about 100. We're also very well known for our food. 14 of these houses have dining halls in them. The 15th is in our campus or student center. It's a one-size-fits-all meal program with about 10 menu options available during any meal period. You simply swipe your student ID to access any of the dining halls on campus. In closing, since we don't have more time to talk about our places, let me say that I think at Smith, we offer the best of a lot of different worlds. We're a small residential liberal arts college. You have the smaller community the housing system creates, the larger community within the 5 colleges. And then if you need a big city fix, we're under 2 hours from Boston and 3 hours from New York City. So thank you. And I think we're ready for our next slide. And I think you get me again on this. So let's talk a bit about the kind of community you'd be joining if you attend a women's college. You know, women's colleges focus on making our diverse student communities inclusive. On our campuses, up to 48% of our students are either international or US students of color. Up to 74% receive some kind of need-based financial aid. And the majority of our students attended public high schools. And there's also the diversity of opinions and voices, which is very evident on our campuses. In studies, graduates from women's colleges perceived a greater amount of openness, tolerance, and awareness in the community than their peers who attended co-ed institutions. There's been research done that women at women's colleges take advantage of opportunities they might not at a co-ed school. Leadership at our schools are for women. 85% of Student Government Association presidents at co-ed liberal arts schools are men, and yet 60% of the students are women. But at our places, as one of our colleagues likes to say, it's not about equal opportunity, it's about every opportunity. When you attend a women's college, you are the show in the classroom, on the athletic field, in every club and organization. So there are naturally more women, a broader diversity of women, and more varied examples of women as role models and mentors. You have outstanding role models in the faculty, half or more of whom are often women, senior administrators, most of whom are women, as well as our accomplished alumni. Leadership skills and styles are developed at our places because there's opportunity, need, support, and encouragement. The research also shows that men tend to speak up more in classrooms. So women's colleges allow more frequent and positive connections with their faculty. And again, in studies, graduates of women's colleges identified this fact that their alma maters enable students to engage with top faculty and resources as a key attribute of women's colleges. Women's college graduates credit their success to interaction with a high-quality teaching-oriented faculty. They report strong benefits from mentoring, small classes, and personal interaction with professors. At women's colleges, all of the resources, from sophisticated research equipment to preeminent athletics facilities to internship and fellowship funding, are focused on and available to women students. So forget about the old boys network and welcome to the ageless women's network. If you choose a women's college, you'll be joining this community of firsts, because our graduates include the first woman to head a major American university, the first woman president of Harvard, one of the first two African American women to receive a doctorate in mathematics, the first female physician in Kenya, the first woman director of the Office of the UN High Commission, and the first woman to be nominated as a candidate for president of the United States by a major political party. Our graduates collectively form what is arguably the largest and strongest women's network in the world. At our colleges, students are exposed to a broad range of female role models in leadership, as well as to a diverse range of leadership models. And as students and future alumni of women's colleges, they're directly connected to some of the most powerful professional women's networks in the world. Extracurricular activity at women's colleges is also viewed as deeper and more meaningful, but it's also more frequent, as women's college students tend to be more involved and engaged in clubs, especially academic and community service-based organizations. So generally speaking, our institutions are not ones that have these traditionally large American football games, nor Greek life organizations and parties. But this is not to say that our students don't like to have fun. That is definitely not true. I think of this as expanding what is perhaps traditionally defined as American college fun. Our colleges do have sports, we do have parties, we do have a lot of fun. It just happens on a smaller scale with more buy-in and participation of everyone there. And speaking of fun, traditions. Women's colleges love our traditions. Traditions tie our communities together, and they allow for tight-knit and deep bonds to form. At a women's college, you end up thinking a lot about history, who came before you, how this college came to be, but you also actively think about the future, how you want to leave your mark on this college and on the world. And traditions are that bridge between past, present, and future. So women's colleges are places where there's no one kind of social life. Like there may be, for example, at a big American football school where everyone tailgates and goes to the big game. You don't have to think much or do much about social life because everyone gets swept up in this wave. But what if you don't like football? Women's colleges are somewhat the opposite. Rather than peer pressure, there's peer support. They're places where students can find friends and extracurricular activities that feel authentic. Maybe that's hanging out with friends, binge watching TV shows, baking cookies, going to a museum, trying a new restaurant, seeing a concert, etc. So let's not perpetuate the idea that the only social life there is at college is large, wild parties. And now the next slide, please.
All right, thanks, Meredith. That's some great lead-ins to talking about outcomes and thinking about what do you draw from your community and from your academic and community experience at a women's college, and how does that apply, and what does that look like after you leave? So one of the things that happens during your 4 years at a women's college is that you really begin to break down both overt and subtle barriers that tend to limit women's perceptions of what's possible for them. And so options begin to open up as those mentors that Meredith was talking about help to facilitate opportunities. Students of women's colleges experience personal and professional growth, and our graduates exhibit confidence and boldness as they pursue their goals and whatever comes next for them. So much of this growth and self-awareness occurs inside of the classroom, but many students find that their involvement in those activities and those leadership opportunities as being equally valuable. Since our campus organizations are run by women and our students get to experience top-level leadership positions that aren't always realistic opportunities at coeducational colleges. And so the research shows that the young women who opt out of positions at young women often opt out of leadership positions at coeducational environments, but in our colleges, they develop the habit of stepping forward and pursuing those positions of responsibility. So developing these habits as a college student is one of the reasons that they are disproportionately represented among women who hold the highest positions in their fields, specifically fields that have been traditionally dominated by men, such as finance, government, and anything related to STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And those have historically excluded women from the top. So graduates from women's colleges are taking these skills that they've learned from those community attributes and applying them directly to reaching those highest levels of their fields. The presence of successful women as role models, especially sisters graduates, is another factor that helps our students envision their future success. Graduates from women's colleges are remarkably loyal to their institutions and to each other. I always say women's college alums are the fiercest of all of the alum networks that you're going to find. There's such a camaraderie that comes from making the unconventional choice of attending a women's college. And as a result, the college graduates have something in common that is much deeper than graduates of coeducational institutions. We see that time and time again when we see alums bumping into each other in the airports, or seeing another women's college graduate on a resume of an applicant and bringing them in for an interview as a result. So these things, they stay with you forever. The self-awareness and ability to navigate challenges in a world that is still male-dominated are some of the hallmarks of our alums, and that is really what sets us apart and prepares our students for success after leaving our colleges as well. Next slide, thanks.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about a few of the perceptions of women's colleges that are out there in the world, and maybe bust a few myths. They've been hinted at, I think, along the way as we've been giving our presentation, but I wanted to kind of address a few of these head on. So one perception, I guess, that we've heard about at women's colleges is that all women's college students are very staunch feminists. And to that, I would answer yes and no. That the one interesting thing about women's colleges is that you don't have to prove what a woman does. We know that. We know that about you. Our students don't walk around thinking about their gender all day. You don't have to, and that is what's really liberating. So it's a little bit counterintuitive maybe than people think. At the same time, women's issues are front and center and very important. I heard someone say once that women's colleges are a place where you don't get special treatment because you're a woman, but rather you get the equal treatment that you might not get elsewhere. The second perception that is out there about women's colleges is that students are mostly LGBTQ. And to that, I would answer yes, no, maybe, and we don't know. All of the above, not a demographic that we necessarily keep track of. But when you visit a women's college, what you will see and feel is a tremendous sense of inclusiveness across the gender spectrum. And that's really important to all of our campuses and very evident. And this includes the whole gender spectrum, including our cisgender students as well. Are our students diverse? Yeah, and to that I would answer yes. We are not the elite places with pearls and gloves that maybe some people are thinking of. Women's colleges are very diverse. At Bryn Mawr, for example, almost half of our students are either international students or students of color. Academically, wide range of academic interests. Students at women's colleges major in math and science. Much more than they do at co-ed institutions. So that brings kind of a different academic, intellectual diversity to our campuses. And then the question of, are women who graduate from women's colleges prepared for the quote unquote real world? And I always think, have you met a women's college graduate? These women are ready for the real world. Meredith talked earlier about the fact that women at women's colleges take advantage of opportunities more and in a different way than they might at a co-ed institution. So all of these opportunities end up on your resume, and students have a really impressive resume of experiences when they graduate from a women's college. And that certainly makes you prepared for the real world. Among our alums, we have some pretty high flyers like Hillary Clinton, Benazir Bhutto, Gloria Steinem. These are not shy, sheltered women that can't deal with the real world. So hopefully that's been a few ways to address some of the both myths and truths of women's colleges. And I think we're going to pass it on to our next colleague to talk about admissions. Thanks.
Okay, so here you see a cheat sheet we hope will be helpful, outlining our application deadlines, our testing requirements, interview opportunities, and financial aid policies. So in conclusion, and surveying the now 170-year history of women's colleges, one can't help but be struck by the continuity of the tradition and its power to engender a palpable coming to selfhood among students. The experience of being part of this alternative sphere of unlimited female possibility binds graduates across the generations into an affirming sisterhood. Next slide, please. Despite our small size and our fewer numbers, the historic sisters and the many institutions founded in our likeness in the US and across the world have had a tremendous effect, propelling women forward as change agents in the larger world that devalues them. Now more than ever, we really believe that the world needs women's colleges. And I believe we are ready to field some questions that might have come in from the audience. And I think we're going to maybe, are we reading them or?
Yeah, I will moderate this part. Thank you so much to our panelists for giving such a great an in-depth overview of women's colleges. So we do have some questions, and so we'll just start tackling them. So I think there's a general question out there. Someone is asking about just what you are specifically looking for, excuse me, and what you're specifically looking for in your applicants in applying to women's colleges. So maybe if you wouldn't mind speaking to the students out there that are listening, that are maybe considering women's college, how would they know that they might be a better fit for a women's college versus a co-ed university institution?
Well, I can kick us off with that. So actually, we have also done quite a bit of surveying and hearing from others in our community about who is a good fit. And what we have found is a lot of what's been alluded on is that there isn't a specific characteristic of an individual student that would make them a good or a bad fit at one of our schools. It's more about what you're looking for institutionally. Meredith said it very well. We don't have these huge American football teams and stadiums, and that is not what centers our culture on our campuses. So if you are looking for that college experience, sure, they are adjacent to us in our partnerships, but they are not in our communities. And so for students who are maybe looking for those large, like American football center kind of environments, we can't offer that for you. We can offer being close to that, but we can't offer that as your community on our campuses. But what we found is that there isn't one particular student who would be a good or a bad fit. Although what is common of each of our institutions, as is true for many small liberal arts colleges, is that you have to be ready to come to class and to learn. We do not have big classrooms for you to sit in the back or skip class or anything like that. Our professors know when you're there and when you're not, and they want you to be engaged. So if you're ready to kind of take that front seat in your learning, these are great institutions for you. But what you will notice is that we each have very different personalities too. We're like sisters in that we have a lot of shared things in common, but we have different personalities. And I think for Mount Holyoke and Smith, we get asked this question constantly because we are similar sized institutions, both Seven Sisters women's colleges, and we're in the same location. But as you've seen today, there are different things about us. So if you're contemplating which women's colleges might be the best fit for you, which few or many, I would encourage you also to follow us on social media, ask us to get you in touch with current students to try and learn the personalities of our schools, because there are a lot of things that are a little less easy for us to rattle off in presentations as those tangible differences. But certainly when you reach our campuses, you might find that one is a better fit for you than another.
And thanks, Annie. I wanted to chime in too, that when you talk to our current students, a good number of them were not necessarily looking for women's colleges when they were in your shoes and when they were beginning the college search. So we're not necessarily a campus full of women who wanted to go to women's college or even went to girls' high schools. Most of our students actually have attended co-ed high schools. Now, with that said, when you do talk with our students and our alums, they will also tell you that the experience at a women's college has been really transformational, and that the fact that that she attended a women's college was one of the best and most important experiences of her college experience. So I think it's very interesting how students really, sort of transform and come to feel like this is the most and authentic place to be themselves.
Great, thank you. What's really interesting in the presentation to hear from a lot of the schools presented here about the strength of their STEM program in particular. So if you wouldn't mind just speaking to how the advantages, the outcomes of being a STEM student in an industry that is usually male dominated. So I can see if you're in a co-ed environment, you might be outnumbered with male peers, whereas that is going to be different in a women's college, and how that impacts their trajectory post-graduation. And there's also a specific question tied to that from one of our participants about opportunities to be doing research and to be doing labs on campus. So if you wouldn't mind just expounding on the STEM part of your campuses.
And I'm happy to start us out on that response, because what you said, Junrock, is absolutely true, that while many of our students, if they've been interested in the STEM fields before coming to us, they may have found that they were one of, one or two or a handful of girls in those STEM classes in their high schools. And then when they get to us, they find that they're in the majority. And so they have that experience. Certainly they're having students from other schools within our partnerships and our consortia, male students joining them in those classes, but still, women are in the majority there. But for example, at Smith, I mentioned we're the only women's college with our own fully accredited engineering program, which really attracts a lot of young men interested in studying engineering who are coming from the co-ed liberal arts colleges in our consortium. They could choose to go to the big university, but they've gotten used to those small classes and the access they have to faculty, so they come over to Smith to take those classes. Well, in the final year of our engineering program, we place all of our students in these design teams where they're working with a real world client, helping to address their engineering needs. And then at the very end of that full year, working with these real world clients, we have an open symposium and the students come together and present to their clients in these teams. And it's very interesting to see some of the guys who are part of those teams with our Smithies. But I think what our students have learned, because they're getting the experience where they are in the majority in their classes, they're developing those strong voices that we're helping them to hone to be able to, go out and be leaders in their field, so that when they get back into a setting that might be more male dominated, they're really prepared to, advocate for themselves, to assert their ideas and to take on those leadership roles. So that is my 2 cents on the topic, if anyone else would want to chime in.
Sure. I'll jump in because I just see the kind of mentorship that goes on with our students and professors that see, many of our professors are female. I mean, we have sort of many who are male as well, but I think having these female mentors in the science and mathematics areas is just incredible, because they can really help you to really see your future and help you talk about graduate programs, about what you're going to find when you get into these lab situations or internships that are sort of not in this sort of women's college environment, and really sort of talk those things through, right? What is it going to be like when you want to go on to get a doctorate degree or to go into medicine, where sometimes your hours are really long, and sort of like, how are you going to balance your life? Like, we talk about these things at women's colleges, and I find that a lot of times at co-ed colleges, they don't. And so women get into those environments, and then it's harder at that point. And so I really see such a benefit to having some of those mentors very, very early on, and also getting our students into lab situations very, very early on. So many of our students in their first year. And some of this is about being at a liberal arts college where there's a ton of research going on within the science and math areas, that students always feel like, I think a lot of students think you have to go to a university if you want to do science research. And that is so not true, because our faculty are bringing in millions and millions of dollars of grant money, and they need to hire students, and they're hiring our students. So even in that first year, we have students that are already in the labs and working. And then you have this 4-year experience of that. So you really come out having great amount of experience in the science areas.
Again, I want to add one additional thing. I'm not sure if it's true for all of our colleges, but at Mount Holyoke, it sounds really small, but when you're thinking about just the height of a lab bench, of a lab work table, it's actually the traditional lab table height was geared for the average man's height. And it's based on that. So it's like ergonomically most comfortable for the average man. But at Mount Holyoke, our lab counters are a couple of inches. I don't, I can't convert with the average feet in inches this early in the morning in the US to meters and centimeters, but our lab counter heights are a few inches shorter to accommodate the average woman's height. And so that sounds really small. Of course, women can function perfectly well at average counter heights, and they will after leaving Mount Holyoke and while they're doing research over their summers at other institutions. But I think that's another example in ways that fields like STEM and so many aspects of our world have been built for men. If you're thinking about stair heights and all of these things, the way that cars are designed, they are designed and built for the average man, not the average woman. And so what I think is so powerful about a women's college experience in so many fields, including STEM fields, is that we built our campus for you. That doesn't mean everything at women's colleges are teeny tiny smaller, but it just is kind of an example of the ways in which women are asked to fit into a man's world instead of having these resources built for them. And so at women's colleges, our campuses are there for you. These opportunities are for you. And so I think that's just kind of a very small, tiny little thing that kind of just shows and illustrates our missions and what we're here to do. And it's to be here for you and to further you and propel you for whatever goals you have after leaving our schools.
I think that ties well into our next question about how campuses are specifically designed for women. There's a question about safety. And I know that my mother's biggest concern when she sent me off far away to college was, would I be safe? And I know now as a mother of a daughter, that's definitely in the forefront of my mind. So if you wouldn't mind speaking to the parents that are listening and also to our students, about safety and how that differs on your campuses compared to a co-ed campus.
I mean, I'll start. I also have two daughters, and one of them graduated from Barnard and the other is a senior at Smith. So I sent them off very, obviously very concerned as well. And I think, I always start in the sense that I think all of us don't assume that students know anything, right? Like we really want to give our students a lot of information when they first get there. So from day one on orientation, there is a lot of information that we throw at our students to help them understand the neighborhood, to help them understand what safety means and is all about in terms of everything from like how you're, like carrying your bag and your keys and like watching out in your environment. I mean, we are very safe environments, but I think everywhere in the world you have to sort of learn some safety skills. We all have very, very strong what we call different on different campuses, but sort of public safety offices. And so those individuals are really there to help watch our community and help our students. And so there are going to be individuals that are stationed throughout campus just to be there in case students need them. We all have what they are called these like call boxes around campus so that if there's any sort of emergency, we all have emergency numbers. And I know that certainly at Barnard, we tell the students, put that number in your phone right when you get there. So you just always feel like you know who you could call in any sort of emergency at any given time. Others may want to chime in as well.
I would chime in that women just think differently. We think differently about our safety and security. Walking alone means something very different to a woman than it does to a man. And so you have a campus full of people with that same mentality. I would also highlight that many of us have honor codes And that's just a super, it's nothing that you memorize or or sign, but it's part of the campus culture. And there's an extremely high level of trust and respect among students for their ideas, for their stuff. There's very little theft or vandalism, that kinds of thing at women's colleges, because that trust and respect and that level of integrity is so high at women's colleges. They're supportive, we're supportive of one another, we're not competitive.
Thank you. Well, I do think we have time for maybe one more question, and then I will allow our panelists to say their final words at the end. So one last question is about what was talked about earlier about that mentorship relationship. So if you, not to put you on the spot, but if you have a specific example to give about how these mentorships work, and maybe is it something that's formalized, or is it something that happens organically? And how have you seen how these mentorship opportunities really just bloom to not only equip students while they're on campus, but also post-graduation and beyond? So if you have a story to tell, great. But if you wouldn't mind just speaking more to how that works out and comes about among your students and faculty members.
Well, I think maybe it was on my slide when it first came up. It came up many times, but at Smith, this idea of peer mentorship is ingrained in students really from the outset, starting from the houses that students live in. We have a big and little SIB program in each of our houses. We have elected student leaders, from a head of new students to an academic advisor, the president of the house, even a birthday coordinator is an elected leadership position in the houses at Smith. So that idea of peer mentorship, older students really working with our first year students, begins there. But at women's colleges, our alum networks, we can't say enough about the strength and the loyalty and the commitment of our alum networks. Essentially, women want to help other women succeed. And this network of alums, extends beyond your own women's college alum network to graduates of women's colleges in general, who are all very eager to hire women's college students in internship positions, and then later on for paid jobs. And so, that the network itself, I think, is a huge part of this mentorship that, again, just kind of naturally happens on our campuses because everyone is collaborating together, supporting one another, and wanting to see one another succeed.
Great.
One just super quick addition. Thanks, Meredith, for talking about how students mentor each other. I think most of us, or all of us, do not have freshman dorms. That tends to, all of our students are living with each other. And again, that's sort of somewhat of a unique thing in that our students are able to mentor each other as well, just as you said, through the residential life.
Yeah, that's great. Definitely know that, and studies back this up, that ones that have a mentor through their life really do find more success in all areas of life. So it's great to see that being fostered from the college level, that I know benefits beyond graduation. I do want to just sneak in one more question, because I do think this is an important one, about mental health support systems on your campuses. So if someone could just take this and talk very quickly about how students are supported with their emotional and mental health.
I can speak briefly because I mentioned it in my part of the Mount Holyoke talk of some of the things that we do, which I actually think probably many of our campuses offer similar sorts of programming as well. A student asked me, and I will imagine that this is also true for many of our campuses, a student once asked me about like mental health kind of clubs for students who are like interested in learning about mental health and exercising their skills. And she's like, I couldn't find anything on your website. And I ended up kind of combing through our organizations and found like 5 or 6 related to that. So certainly ways for students to get involved, but we all also do offer counseling services on our campuses as well if you do need more immediate help, and with professionals who are trained and skilled in that as well, available to all of our students who need them. So we all of us have a commitment to making sure that students' mental well-being is taken care of. It's such an important part of the transition, especially going abroad and so far away from home for college. So certainly know that we all have you covered in terms of resources to help you get through that.
Great, thank you so much. Well, the time has just zoomed by as it normally does on a Tuesday evening, but I would like to just open up to our panelists and maybe just say some final words to the students and parents that are listening in. We can go in alphabetical order like we did last time if you want.
Sure. Well, I'm delighted that we were, have a chance to be able to share our schools with you. I think that just your being here, listening in to me is really a sign that you are like a risk taker and just seeking out something for yourself, which I think, in an environment in high school where we're often like drawn to like what other people are doing, like to do something that and think about something that might be a little bit unusual, takes a lot of guts. And they're amazing choices. As you can see, I am a graduate and have 2 daughters who have gone to women's colleges. So I can't say enough about the environments. Thank you.
I've got to echo a lot of what Jennifer has said. And I think you'll be surprised by women's colleges. I consistently see that when students, enroll and actually come, they're consistently surprised that it maybe is and isn't what you thought it would be.
Great. Well, maybe a little bit different, but as you're going through the application process, I know it's stressful, especially during a pandemic when you might not have activities or SATs and all of that. Relax. We are all living through it. We're all going through it together. And we want to show you grace as your applications might look different than they have in the past. And feel free to just be yourself, show us who you are. We aren't looking for one particular person. We are looking for many people who are authentically themselves. So be yourself, have fun, and try and enjoy the process as much as you can.
And I really want to just say, finally, thank you to InitialView for hosting us tonight. And to all the students out there, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Please look at all of the ways that you can virtually engage with our institutions. We have lots of virtual programming for you to find out about different aspects of our individual schools. But we absolutely cannot wait for the happy day when we can welcome you onto our campuses. And until then, we hope that you all stay healthy and stay safe and stay in touch. Thank you.
Well, many thanks to our panelists, Jen, Meredith, and Annie. Thank you for waking up very early in the morning and sharing your expertise with us. This has been very informative and eye-opening for even me, where now I'm like considering it for my own daughter. This page has been up throughout where you can continue the conversation with our panelists. You can check out their websites. They have very robust information on their websites and their social platforms, and their email addresses are here. So please do not hesitate to ask those questions that were not answered tonight. I know that each of them will be delighted to hear from you and to answer your questions. So thank you, everyone, for Zooming in at a time when I know we are all kind of zoomed out and we have fatigue, screen fatigue, but I know that this is extremely important as you learn about different options for your future. And just want to echo what Annie said. These are real people on the other side of the application that are, and as you can see, they're lovely people who want to learn more about you. So do relax, don't get stressed out too much, and know that there's a lot of grace, especially in this era in which we're living in during COVID. So thank you so much for tuning in to Tuesday Talks, and it's just been a delight sharing this evening time with you week in and week out. 감사합니다.